All right. Well, Shabbat Shalom, y'all, once again. I'm your host, Joshua, here at goChrist. I'm excited to walk you through the grand finale of our Household Order series. It's one of those series that the Father had been dealing with me about for a very long time, as he had given me the word, some 7 years ago now. Get your house in order. And like everyone else, I sit here and think at times and places, I've got my house in order. And lo and behold, there's more. You ever been there? In that position where you think you got it all figured out, and then the Father comes and gives you an examination inside of your heart, and you begin to understand that you are not, in fact, where you believe that you're walking. Welcome to the journey here at goChrist. This is why we awaken, repent, and return. Every week we have fellowship here. You're welcome to join us by heading over to gochrist.com/fellowship. Also, for any of you that are watching the broadcast, what we do here is a quick message, and then we break out of this live broadcast into fellowship, but we also follow a series of disciplines, the SPFs. So make sure that you are in tune with that. You can actually get our free discipleship guide at gochrist.com/guide. All right, so let's jump into this. This is the final one. Everything is going to start inside of us, as we talked about in this last series. And this series is about that first initial ministry, as it were. And we're going to talk about family as fellowship. And you may not have looked at it that way before, but the Father has set a table for us to give us a mirror, if you will, into our capability of operating inside of that four-letter word. You guessed it. Love. So here we are. How to have fellowship inside of your family. Well, the fact is, the home itself isn't a shelter. It's just not a dwelling, right? It is a gathering place. It is a sanctuary, as we've talked about in the beginning of this series with the kingdom in your kitchen. If you look in Acts 2, verse 46, they were breaking bread together in each other's homes. And in fact, there is a precedent for this that's coming in these last days here, where we're going to have to gather inside of homes because the public gathering is not going to be allowed. I know. Hard to receive. If you don't receive it now, just put it on the shelf and understand that the Father is trying to develop something inside of you, right in front of you, and then it will expand beyond. And we'll move on to that in our next series. But let's wrap this up. So the first topic we're talking about is the fact that the very first fellowship that you enter into is your family. Now, when the Father began to deal with me, I had suffered through a divorce and gone through basically the destruction of my entire household. This was a very hard pill to swallow, and it's taken a lot of years to be set free, as the Father was showing me area after area after area where I was not walking in fellowship with the family. I was, in fact, sitting as an authoritarian, commanding obedience rather than becoming the example. So let's read it in 1 Timothy 3:5 here. It says, if anyone doesn't know how to manage his own household, how will he be able to care for God's? How? Without somebody having done it, how are they going to be able to do it? Really simple, isn't it? Well, the leadership itself, as we talked about, starts inside of ourselves, and then it enters into our home. For whether you are with an entire family or whether you are by yourself in your space, 'tis irrelevant. Situations and circumstances change, but your capacity to operate as an example, to have fellowship, let's say it's just you for the moment, with the Father, and fellowship with one another. That's why we have this fellowship opportunity here for you to be able to plug into. But this isn't where it starts. It starts right in our homes. And it will always be proven there first. You see, I was just reading the other day. Let me not sidetrack. He says, keep going. Okie doke. Now, this is real simple. Okay. Have I done it at home first? Because if we can do it at home, if we can do without, if we can do with out the ways of the world, if we could do without the ways of our flesh, and we can allow the Spirit of God to move on the inside of us, then we're going to begin to operate in true power. This is what's going to go set the captives free, beloved. That's what the Father's after. Those who will worship him in spirit and in truth. And of course, you're going to be able to see that inside of the fruit production of a saint's life. All right, the meals, the moments, and the meaning. This topic is all about, again, being on purpose with things. Okay, you can see this inside of Acts 2, verse 42, how that they devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship. Fellowship, one with another. You know, ultimately, we're going to come into one big family from the four corners of the world with very, very different backgrounds, with very, very different understandings on certain things. And somehow, by the grace of God and by his Spirit, we're going to be able to operate together in love. And this will be all over the place, whether it's around the gathering around the meals, whether it's the moments where we're passing by and operating in proximity to each other. There's times where we've got to collaborate. There is meaning in all of the table settings that are set before you and I today. But have you ever asked the Father about that? Well, we're going to inquire today. So once we break out of this live broadcast, we're going to dig deep and see what the Father has for us in terms of fellowship inside of our homes. But you want to be able to create a rhythm. Ultimately, there is a rhythm, an established rhythm, as we've talked about before when we talked about Sabbath, from creation. You know, it can't be all work and no rest. It can't be all doing our own way and not seeking his counsel. In this development of the rhythm, then this example will be given to those in the house, roundabout, and so on and so forth into the communities and wherever we're going to be sent. But it's got to start at home. It's got to start inside. It's got to start with some worship, true, authentic worship. And as we said before, in spirit and in truth. Now, the third topic is the idea of hospitality. This is one of those things we're being admonished about to be able to share. In fact, when we're talking about fasting, way back in the series of the SPF, study, prayer, fasting, fellowship, and service, that fasting discipline is all about the way the Lord created it anyway, was for us to be able to deal our bread to the poor and to bring them into our homes. See, it's a place of ministry. It's hospitality. We're even admonished that we're going to have to entertain strangers because you never know when you're going to entertain an angel and not even be aware of it. How profound. It says here in Romans 12:13, share with the Lord's people who are in need and practice hospitality. It's an outpost. Beloved, if you want to look at it that way in a warfare manner, it is a kingdom outpost, your home. Or at least that's what it can become. That's what the Father would like it to become. So what are you doing there? You know, are you actually prepared to receive others? Are you able to look well into their ways? Are you able to minister to them an example? What is that example? See, these are all things I can't sit here and point the finger at you because I have to be busy about pointing and poking the finger in my own eye. Okay? We are all on this journey together. But I assure you, the Father has more in store for us. He has more prepared for us than we are currently walking in. And as we approach the very end of all of this thing, as we are in these last days now, this will become more and more evident the further in we get. So keep an eye on it. Remember, weekly routine, be able to reflect, be able to examine. See, hospitality will then become a tool for discipleship. Truly, and deliverance. You know, you ever realize that you need to be delivered of something? You come into someone's house and you see how they operate and you go, wow. Wow. And for the first time, you kind of get shook free of that because, oh, there's a different way. I didn't know. Right. Beloved, none of us had the greatest of examples inside of our lives. There's a few unicorns walking the earth, but figuratively speaking. but we just simply didn't. And it wasn't demanded of them, but it will be demanded of his saints today. And that's why this message is wrapping up so powerfully as we go into this final section of the idea of raising a standard. We're not just about raising children inside of our homes. This is about raising a standard. If you go into Proverbs 22, verse 6, so I'll give you a great example. It says, train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he is old, he will not depart. You know, so many times I hear saints talking about how the children don't want anything to do with the church, or they come in and they get baptized and they just go on living the worldly life, almost as if it were done to please somebody, or they had been requested to do so. Now, again, it's one thing to go do an outward work, but it's a whole different thing to actually clean the inside of the cup. So by training up the children in the way they're to go, we are able to start on the inside and raise them up in that discipleship process. So how do you apply this inside of your life? Well, we talked about it here in fellowship many times. First off, we just got to examine ourselves. Right? Again, every saint's got their calling. Everyone's going to produce a certain yield of fruit. It's not for us to compare one to another. Certainly that's not wise. But what the Father is interested is in an intimate relationship with an intimate time of reflection and course correction that ultimately will bring us into alignment with his will. So one of the ways we do that is having a fellowship night. You know, we were just having today a very different experience on how that we entered into the Sabbath. Every night we've been into a regular cadence of course, this is not 100%, but we are well on the journey into establishing a nightly cadence where we will have a family time around the word and in prayer and in praise. And it's important that we begin to model this. And again, if you're by yourself right now and you have no one else around you, what's that pattern look like for you? What are those established routines? What's that discipleship of yourself look like? And as we move forward in this, we're going to talk one with another about this after seeking the Father, breaking out of this broadcast into the fellowship. So whatever's coming up for you, write it down and get ready to share, because I'm excited to share with you guys what's coming up for me. Okay, so the last thing here is, of course, be able to share testimonies with one another. And this is difficult at times because, you know, some folks, again, when you start out, maybe it's not going to feel real natural. But see, the Father's dealing with each soul individually. And as we experience here in the fellowship of goChrist, you know, we get to talk about that inside of Men's Weekly and the other containers that we operate. If you'll show up with your heart and a desire to share, you have very valuable lessons inside of your experiences every single week, probably every single day. But if you're anything like me, you don't catch them all. So it takes some hindsight, and week by week is very sufficient. Amen. So look into that. That's a possibility. And then, of course, you know, what's one area that you could establish? This is just, again, free for all. What is that you could do in your home that would make it welcoming, make it inviting, make it a place where you could have fellowship? Maybe it's with one other person. Maybe it's with yourself. Maybe it's with the entire family. Maybe it's just with your spouse. Whatever the case is, again, you'll have to take a look at these. You'll have to examine it. And then, of course, pray and ask the Father, Father, what can I do inside of my home to make this a place of discipleship, of fellowship, of community, kingdom community? All right, so that's about all we got for today. I want to make sure that it's a short and sweet and hard to beat. We're going to break out of this live broadcast now, head into our fellowship. So if you're watching this broadcast on YouTube, be sure to like, subscribe, comment. And then if you want to join us for fellowship, you are more than welcome. Head over to goChrist.com/fellowship, and we will see you there. Until then, drop a comment on whatever your takeaway was. What is the thing that the Father's dealing with you about, so that we can share with you in that, and also be praying for you, which we will do anyway. So we look forward to connecting with you down the road. And for those of you in fellowship, we'll see you here shortly. Until then, Shabbat Shalom from my home to yours, and have a wonderful weekend.